Psalms 119, verse 11. Psalms 119, verse 11. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. And the church said amen. We unloaded the kids out of the car many years ago, and we were at the Grand Canyon. I've always teased Adina. Is she here? I think I saw her earlier in the service. I hope you are listening to me, Adina. And I hope you have a legitimate reason. She's cooking. Oh, that's right. She left. She's helping. Oh, by the way, I did forget to greet Brother and Sister Gates. God bless you. Forgive me for that. I had my mind on my wife there. Thank you for coming and joining us this weekend. Haven't you enjoyed it? Brother Gates and Sister Gates, his lovely wife. Come on, make a little noise and let them know that we're glad they are here. Mandy, I don't know. Where are you at? Mandy, where are you? God bless you. Good to see you. Stand up so we can welcome you. And we're glad you came by to visit with us and give us a little help and some encouragement. And thank you. And we're just excited. And you'll be singing for us again tonight, have the group, and that's going to be great. So, oh, Avi, where you at? Forgive me. All right. Ooh, what a beautiful girl. God bless you. How could you have such a beautiful daughter? An ugly old guy like us, how could we have such beautiful children? Notice I said us. Anyway, Adina, we were coming up to the Grand Canyon, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was my first trip there. Kids were very small. And I was pretty pumped myself, about being at the Grand Canyon. It's one of the great wonders of the world, natural wonders of the world. And Adina was reading. She was reading, and she was reading a little novel or something that she had. I don't remember. But anyway, she was in the back seat of the car and fully and completely absorbed and didn't want to get out. And I had to explain to her, we were at the Grand Canyon. You are. You know how daddies feel when you take your kids somewhere, like you've just paid $5,000 to get into Disney World? And you sometimes you say it, or at least you have a way of indicating you are going to have a good time today. Can I get a witness? Do I have any real people? Should we just go home right now? Do I have real people here? All right, good. So have you ever had that little attitude, daddies, mamas? Kids, you drag them all the way to the Grand Canyon, and you can't even get them out of the car because they're reading some little book back there. And I said, we're going to walk down there. And then she didn't want to walk down there. Well, I had no intention of going. My kids were very small. It's kind of dangerous, really, to edge your way along the Grand Canyon. They don't have they don't have ropes, and they don't have gates, and they don't have fences. So you could kill yourself in the Grand Canyon. So I knew I couldn't really take the whole trip down, but we finally convinced her that she was going to go down as far as we went to the Grand Canyon. We came back and, of course, went to the parks and did all the things people do. And when we got to the edge, or we got out of the car another time, there is a place there where you can literally walk right to the edge of the Grand Canyon. And you can walk right out to the very edge. And again, there's no fences or anything to restrain you. So there are many people in the court. I think almost not every year, but many years, people have come and leaped across off the edge, suicidal efforts, and others have just slipped or fallen, getting too close to the edge for whatever reason. So you can hardly resist, and this is the point I want you to get. If you're in the Grand Canyon, and some of you that have been there, I'm sure would validate what I'm getting ready to say, you can scarcely resist the temptation to go where? to the edge. That is right. It's a psychological thing as well. I'm not going to give you a long lecture on this. You can look it up yourself. But there's just some kind of dynamic inside a human being that causes them to want to go to the edge of anything that seems, especially if it seems to be somewhat dangerous. Or maybe some other reason. It's complex. But so I took my trip a little bit ahead of my family and walked out to the edge, and there was a ranger there. And this ranger saw me going out to the edge. It wasn't like I went right, to the extreme edge, like way out like this. But I was close enough that I could have fallen. The rock there are kind of slippery, and they could roll around. You could easily slip and fall. And I forget the numbers, but in the course of a year, there's almost inevitably somebody that loses their life in the Grand Canyon for one reason or the other. Sometimes on the trail or sometimes on the edge. And the guy walked up to me, the park ranger, and he said, it's interesting, you're standing. We started talking about the edge. He said, be careful about the edge. And I said, well, thank you. And I wasn't a smart aleck or anything. I didn't really want him to stop me from going out there, but nevertheless. And he said to me, it's interesting that you're at a spot where a young lady from California went off the edge. It had just been 10 or 15 days before we had got there, a couple of weeks. And I said, well, what did she jump? He said, well, we don't know. We don't know if she actually slipped and fell or she committed suicide. And she had a lot of problems, and so the consensus among the family was that she probably committed suicide. And then he said to me something that I've never gotten out of my mind that I'm speaking to you about today. He said, it's interesting about the edge in our little conversation. He said, there are two forces at play. He said, in respect to the edge, there's two forces. There's a force that gives people or entices people to walk to the edge for whatever reason. That's force number one, he said. And then he said that there is a second force. The second force is the force that speaks to you or communicates to you, be careful. And that warning that is given by your psychic keeps you from going over the edge in most cases, or at least pulls you back. So there's two forces. One that forces you to go to the edge, and sometimes that force is so strong that it makes you want to go to the very edge. Can I get a witness? Just for the sake of doing it, you want to see how far, like I'm doing right now, just to prove to you that in spite of my sorry knees, I'm taking a very high risk, which I should step back immediately right now. I do want to preach a sermon, not from my hospital bed, however. So there you go. There is a force, he said, and this is the part I never forgot. There's a force that drives you to the edge, as close as you would dare go. And he said there is a second force in our little discussion. And he was very friendly. We were just talking about it. He said the second force is the force that keeps you from going over the edge. That force of balance and sanity that's in the human mind. There's a big question facing all of us. First of all, as citizens of this country, I believe. And what I'm going to say today is not any attempt to politicize anything, but we're just in a very difficult time. We are coming up to the edge. Morally speaking, politically speaking, we're coming up to the edge. We have so many frightening, awesome difficulties that are placed upon us, and we're responsible. For an example, and I'm not belaboring this, I know I talk about it a lot, and you may get very weary with this, but just imagine today, any parent with a small child has got to be concerned with the attack that child can experience from the most corrupting influences within the human race. The device that our children play with, called the computer or the iPad, hooked up to the internet and all that entails, can be in a few seconds. In just a few moments after you walk out of the room, they can be exposed to the most vulgar, bitter, ugly, filthy, demonic spirits known to mankind. In your home, in their bed, at any time, 24 hours a day. That's called walking up to the edge. We're walking up to the edge not only in that category, but not to belabor this point because I don't want to stay here any longer. But there are many, many things in politics, in religion. And let's not get too self-righteous here because we have many apostolic, Pentecostal, spirit-filled people that are walking right up to the edge. Edge of your commitment to doctrine, to everything that pertains to holiness for sure. And it is not, all due respect, please, this is not a bash. My whole life has been invested in young people. But young people have never been more indifferent to the truth than they are today. There is a spirit that has gripped much of our young people today that they believe that if they believe something, then what they believe is valid just because they believe it. The truth is not really an issue with them. Understanding truth is not really an issue so much with them. So we'll talk more about that perhaps in a few minutes. This makes it difficult for us to really get through. But the ranger said, even though there's a force that pushes us to the edge, there is another force that keeps us from doing the foolish thing that even our psychic might tempt us to do. This is very easy to document this. And those of you that have been in counseling meetings or you've been in psychiatry or you've had training in university level especially, you know that these strange forces within the human heart exist. We're walking out to the edge. We're walking out to the edge, and the question is, will that other force, Bishop, keep us from jumping? They guard what was once the tallest building in the world, New York City. What building am I thinking of? No, Empire State Building, before World Trade Center. They had to put fences up, you know, to keep people from jumping over, which was not daily common, but it happened. And guards, the tallest building in the world in Dubai, huge fences there. And one of the people that guard that particular building said to me when I was there back in the just about 3 or 4 years ago at the World Council. He said they have to guard it very carefully because there's people that want to have the reputation as having died by jumping off the tallest building in the world. What causes that? I say we're at the edge, and you know it, but let me just give you some of the words of the former President Obama that he stated in 2007. Whatever we once were, he said, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, a Buddhist nation, a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers. Now, if you look at that powerful statement, you have to say, okay, President Obama, you're right about that. We have come to the edge. And if you combine that statement with the moral decadence that's increasing, the godlessness that is increasing, not only godliness in the secular world, but we have a form of godliness, godlessness, not godliness, but godlessness, even in our churches. Because when you walk away from the truth, you are stepping out into godlessness. So if you combine what President Obama said, that we are no longer a Christian nation, and you combine that with all the godlessness and all the other things that are happening, it's easy for